Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. We're here again to really get into the weeds of some fascinating and often pretty dark post-apocalyptic lore.
And today's subject is definitely leaning towards the dark end of the spectrum. We're tackling Vault 106.
Oh yeah, Vault 106 from Fallout 3. It's one of those locations that just sticks with you, a real exercise in psychological horror, engineered madness, all the good stuff Vault-Tec is famous for.
Infamous, maybe. But yes, we're going deep, synthesizing everything we can find, trying to piece together what really happened there.
Exactly. And this whole deep dive is really powered by you, the listeners. We've sifted through your questions and picked out 5 core ones that cover pretty much everything about 106, from its nuts and bolts to the bigger philosophical questions it raises. It's going to be quite the ride.
A shortcut through the wasteland's whispers straight to the heart of the matter.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But actually, before we seal the vault door behind us, metaphorically speaking.
Good analogy.
Thanks. I want to just take a moment. We know it's getting towards that time of year again, end of the year rush and all that.
Right, holidays are coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So whether you're getting ready for Christmas or maybe New Year's or, whatever it is you might be celebrating or looking forward to, we just wanted to say we genuinely hope you do okay.
Absolutely. Hope you're happy with the channel, hope you're healthy, staying well out there.
We really do appreciate you tuning in and diving deep with us. Your support keeps this whole thing going. It means a lot.
It really does. So thank you. And now, shall we descend into Vault 106?
Let's do it. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting, ironically, with the most solid thing about the place.
Yeah.
Its foundation. All right. First up, we've got a great question to set the scene. This one's from Wasteland Historian 77. Nice name, by the way.
Yeah. Fits right in.
Lovely. Okay, Wasteland Historian asks, can you start with the foundation? What was the original purpose of Vault 106? Where exactly was it built? And who were the initial residents intended to survive there? So, the real basics. Location first.
Right. Location is key. Vault 106 is definitely in the Capital Wasteland area, the setting for Fallout 3. Lore suggests it's probably situated a bit off the beaten path, maybe southwest of the main DC ruins.
So, not right downtown. Makes sense. Why the isolation, you think? Just land availability or something more strategic?
Oh, definitely strategic. Vault-Tec was all about secrecy, especially for their special projects.
Yeah.
Locating 106 away from major population centers reduced the chance of nosy neighbors pre-war or, interference during construction.
And less chance of someone stumbling onto it immediately after the bombs, maybe? Keep the experiment contained?
Precisely. They needed controlled environments. The less external contact, the purer the data. From their perspective, isolation served both the construction phase secrecy and the operational phase control.
Okay, so it's tucked away somewhere relatively remote in the DC area.
Yeah.
Let's talk about building the thing. These vaults weren't exactly prefab sheds, were they?
No, not even close. We're talking about monumental engineering projects. Construction likely started decades before the Great War, maybe as early as the 2050s or even late 2040s.
Decades, wow.
Yeah, these were long-term builds. They involved excavating hundreds of feet underground, often through solid bedrock. Think about the logistics, moving massive amounts of earth and rock, bringing in specialized equipment, all while trying to keep it somewhat hush-hush.
Must have been a nightmare. What kind of materials are we talking about? Super concrete.
Essentially, yes. Multiple layers of highly reinforced, specialized concrete composites. We're talking walls several meters thick in some places, plus layers of steel, lead shielding against radiation, and crucially sophisticated support structures.
Like those kinetic dampeners you mentioned in the outline.
Exactly. Things like kinetic energy dampeners, vibration absorption systems built into the foundations, basically advanced pre-war tech designed to isolate the vault structure from seismic shocks.
Including the shock of, say, a nearby nuclear detonation.
That was the primary design consideration. The goal was for the vault to essentially ride out the immense ground shock from nuclear blasts nearby. It's an incredible feat of defensive engineering.
It really is. Building a subterranean city designed to survive Armageddon.
But
And this is the big Vault-Tec but, isn't it? Survival wasn't the real point of 106.
not its primary purpose, no. That amazing engineering, that promise of safety, it was all just the stage dressing, the prerequisite infrastructure needed to conduct the real experiment.
So, what was the official stated purpose versus the hidden agenda? Did they even pretend it was just about survival?
Oh, they absolutely pretended. The official line sold to the residents and likely most of the construction crews was standard vault protocol, preservation of a select group of American citizens in case of nuclear war, safety, security, continuity, the whole package.
The American Dream Underground Edition.
Pretty much. But internally, within the highest echelons of Vault-Tec and the Enclave elements pulling the strings, Vault 106 had a very specific, very dark designation.
Which was?
It was part of the vast social preservation program, but its specific focus was psychological. It was designed to study the effects of long-term, low-level exposure to psychoactive chemicals on a closed population.
Controlled social decomposition.
Yeah.
Engineered madness, you said it earlier.
That's the core of it. They wanted to see how a normal community would react, adapt, and ultimately disintegrate when reality itself was subtly, constantly warped by chemicals introduced into their environment.
How do we know this was the specific goal? Is it spelled out in terminals or more inferred?
It's pieced together from a few sources within the game. Terminal entries found within Vault 106 hint at irregularities and mention the air filtration system. But the biggest clue is the state you find the vault in, and the direct experience the player character has.
Right, the hallucinations, the lone wanderer experiences, that's not just residual radiation.
No, it strongly implies an active, or at least recently active, chemical agent still present in the atmosphere. And the design itself, particularly the unusually complex and redundant air circulation system.
Which you mentioned earlier. Way more complicated than just keeping the air breathable.
Exactly. It's over-engineered for simple life support, suggesting it had another function. That function almost certainly was the precise delivery and maintenance of aerosolized psychoactive compounds. Vault-Tec likely classified it under something innocuous like behavioral pharmacology or environmental stress response studies.
Jesus. Okay, so they build this nigh-indestructible bunker, equip it with a secret chemical delivery system. Who do they put inside? Who were the unlucky guinea pigs for this?
That's maybe the most chilling part. They didn't pick people with pre-existing conditions or specific psychological profiles they wanted to exacerbate. They picked normal people.
Normal. Why normal? Wouldn't it be easier to break someone already fragile?
Easier maybe, but less scientifically valuable from their twisted perspective. They wanted a baseline. They needed a statistically representative sample of pre-war American society. Middle-class families, office workers, technicians, maybe some blue-collar types. People considered stable, functional members of society.
So they could see the drug's effect on a standard human psyche and social structure.
Precisely. They wanted to observe the process of breakdown from a known starting point. If they started with unstable people, the results could be dismissed as just, crazy people acting crazy. By using normals, they could meticulously document the stages of induced paranoia, delusion, social fragmentation, and violence.
They wanted to see how long it took for Ward Cleaver to start seeing monsters in the walls and attack June.
Crudely put, but essentially yes. They were selecting for baseline sanity specifically so they could measure its systematic destruction. They needed functional people to provide meaningful data on how society fails under sustained chemical psychological assault.
How many people are we talking? Typical vault size?
The vaults varied, but for a social experiment like this, probably somewhere in the range of 100 to maybe 200 residents. Large enough to have social dynamics, small enough to manage initially anyway and observe closely. Housed in typical vault residential sectors.
So a couple hundred regular folks walk into what they think is salvation, handed a key to survival.
And instead, they're sealed into a gas chamber designed not for a quick death, but for a slow, agonizing descent into a living nightmare, all while Vault-Tec presumably watched through hidden cameras or sensors, taking notes.
That is profoundly malicious, choosing normalcy just to shatter it. What about the overseer, the guy in charge inside? Was he in on it?
It's debatable and likely varied between vaults. For an experiment this sensitive, it's possible the overseer knew something was different about 106, but maybe not the full horrific extent.
Like maybe he was told they'd be testing air supplements or stress reduction techniques. Plausible deniability?
Exactly. Plausible deniability, or perhaps a phased reveal. They might have been given protocols to initiate atmospheric adjustments at a certain point post-sealing, perhaps framed as necessary for long-term survival.
But they probably didn't get the memo saying, this will eventually make everyone murderously insane, including you.
Highly unlikely. The overseer was often part of the experiment too. Vault-Tec would want to observe how leadership structures cope and fail under these conditions. The overseer likely succumbing to the same chemicals, losing control, and becoming a focal point of the residents' paranoia would be a key data point.
So the commander becomes just another casualty, maybe even accelerating the collapse. Wow.
It's a horrifyingly efficient experimental design, if you ignore the staggering immorality.
Yeah, efficient is one word for it. Okay, so the stage is set, the vault is built, the unsuspecting residents are chosen, the secret poison is ready. Then comes the day.
Ah.
Let's move to that fateful day, October 23rd, 2077. Our next question from Nuclear Noodle gets right into it. We always see the aftermath, but what was the experience like inside Vault 106 when the bombs actually dropped? Was there internal damage or shaking, and how did the residents cope?
Right, we usually focus on the experiment itself, but the initial hours must have been absolutely terrifying even before the gas started flowing.
Imagine the scene outside. Sirens wailing, panic in the streets, maybe seeing the first flashes on the horizon as people scramble for the vault entrance.
Then the final countdown, the marshals getting the chosen few inside, maybe some desperate people being turned away, and then that huge, multi-ton vault door grinding shut, sealing them in.
A moment of profound relief. Surely,
Yeah.
you made it. You're safe from the fire.
For about 5 seconds. Then the ground beneath them would have erupted. We're talking about multiple nuclear detonations in the DC area, even hundreds of feet underground, protected by all that concrete and steel. The sheer force transmitted to the Earth would be immense.
So not just a little rattle, actual violent shaking.
Oh, absolutely. Think magnitude 8 or 9 earthquake, but sustained, maybe multiple waves of shock hitting them as different warheads detonated. The entire structure, despite the dampeners, would have groaned, shifted, vibrated intensely.
What would that feel like for the residents? Thrown around, lights going out.
Definitely thrown around. Loose items flying, maybe furniture sliding or toppling. The main power grid would almost certainly flicker or fail momentarily, plunging them into the dim red glow of emergency lighting.
Red emergency lights and the world shaking violently. Great start to your apocalypse sanctuary.
And the noise. It wouldn't just be the shaking, it would be the low, terrifying roar of the earth moving, the shriek of stressed metal from the vault structure itself, maybe distant, muffled booms filtering through bedrock, a complete sensory assault in near darkness.
Existential dread cranked up to 11.
Yeah.
I bet the Vault-Tec welcome brochure didn't mention occasional severe structural rattling and the sound of the world ending just above your head, did it?
Hey, probably glossed over that part. Mentioned the state-of-the-art suspension system, maybe. But yeah, the psychological impact of that initial event cannot be overstated. Pure terror.
Did the vault itself take damage? Could the shaking have, like, cracked walls or broken essential systems, maybe compromise the experiment?
That's the chilling part. While there might have been minor internal damage, cosmetic cracks, maybe some non-critical pipe bursts, flickering systems, the core infrastructure, the structure itself, and the vital life support systems, including that crucial air filtration network. They were designed to withstand exactly this.
So the shaking didn't break the poison gas machine.
Essentially, no. Vault-Tec's engineers did their job too well, in a way. The vault held. The integrity of the structure, and thus the integrity of the planned experiment, remained intact despite the cataclysm outside. Their physical survival sealed their psychological fate.
That's grim. So how did people cope in those first few hours, first few days, before the experiment really kicked in? They've just survived the apocalypse, been violently shaken, plunged into semi-darkness. What's the move?
Shock, mostly. Adrenaline come down. Fear. Maybe some initial attempts at community building, finding loved ones, checking on neighbors. Standard vault protocols would likely be initiated by the overseer. Damage assessments, system checks, maybe a mandatory quarantine period or medical checks.
Trying to establish some semblance of order after the chaos.
Exactly. But everyone would be on edge. Highly stressed, sleep deprived, grieving for the world they lost, terrified of the future, crammed into this artificial environment. They're already psychologically vulnerable.
Primed, almost.
Perfectly primed. That initial trauma, the memory of the shaking, the fear of the vault maybe not holding, the claustrophobia, the reliance on unseen systems, and an overseer they barely know, it creates a baseline level of anxiety and mistrust.
So when the overseer, following his Vault-Tec instructions, eventually flips the switch and starts subtly altering the air.
The residents are already halfway towards paranoia. The chemical push just has to nudge them the rest of the way. The external war created the perfect psychological incubator.
The physical survival wasn't a miracle, it was just setting the stage for Act 2.
Precisely. They endured the physical destruction of the world only to face the deliberate chemical destruction of their minds. The shaking stopped, but the real horror was just beginning.
Man. Okay, let's get into that horror, the experiment itself. All right, this is the question everyone asks about Vault 106. It's the core of its terrifying legend. From ChemFiend420, another fitting username.
Seems to be a theme.
Right. ChemFiend asks, This is the core of the lore. What was the specific sustained experiment conducted in Vault 106? How did it break the residents, and what were the mechanisms used to create the psychedelic sanctuary?
Okay, the psychedelic sanctuary, it's a grimly ironic term, isn't it? Because it was anything but sanctuary. The mechanism, as we've touched on, was the continuous introduction of aerosolized psychotropic drugs into the vault's closed air circulation system.
Not like a one-time spray, but constant exposure.
Constant low-level exposure. That's the key. It wasn't meant to cause an immediate, overwhelming trip. It was designed to be insidious, a slow burn.
What kind of drug are we talking about? Something like LSD or something else? Does the lore specify?
The lore doesn't give us a specific chemical name, likely intentionally. But based on the effects described and observed paranoia, sensory distortions, hallucinations, aggression, memory issues, it was probably a bespoke chemical agent synthesized by Vault-Tec.
Something designed specifically for this purpose, not just a known hallucinogen.
Most likely. Think about it. They needed something that could be aerosolized effectively, remain stable in the air system, produce specific long-term psychological effects without being immediately lethal or causing instant incapacitation, and perhaps even be hard to detect initially.
So something subtle enough that people wouldn't immediately say, hey, the air smells like crazy gas.
Exactly. Maybe it was odorless or had a faint, ambiguous smell people might dismiss or get used to. The idea was to work perception gradually so residents wouldn't realize they were being drugged. They'd start questioning their own sanity and each other's long before they questioned the air quality.
How did they control the dose? That seems tricky over years.
That over-engineered air system we talked about, it wouldn't just pump air, it would monitor, regulate, and mix. Vault-Tec could have had automated systems or perhaps protocols for the overseer initially to maintain a specific low concentration parts per million of the agent in the breathable atmosphere. Fine-tuned control.
Like a thermostat for madness.
A deeply unsettling but accurate analogy. They could maintain the precise level of psychological pressure needed to facilitate the breakdown without causing, say, mass organ failure or immediate complete psychosis that would end the experiment prematurely.
Okay, so the drug is in the air, working slowly. How does this actually break people? Walk us through the timeline of social collapse. What happens first?
It probably starts subtly. Mild anxiety, maybe sleep disturbances, people feeling off. Then the perceptual stuff kicks in.
Like what? Seeing things.
Maybe not full-blown apparitions at first, more like colors seem too bright or slightly wrong. Shadows move in the periphery of vision. Familiar sounds take on a sinister edge. A vent humming sounds like whispering. Objects might seem to subtly shift or breathe.
Just enough to make you doubt your senses, make you edgy.
Exactly. And that edginess breeds suspicion. People start misinterpreting social cues. A friendly gesture looks like a threat. Someone seems to be staring. Paranoia starts to take root. Small disagreements escalate. Trust erodes.
And this is happening to everyone, more or less simultaneously.
Pretty much. Which is why it's so effective. If only one person was affected, they'd be isolated, dismissed. But when everyone starts feeling reality slip, they turn on each other. Who can you trust when you can't even trust your own eyes and ears?
The overseer must lose control pretty quickly then.
Absolutely. He's breathing the same air. He starts seeing things or making erratic decisions. Or even if he somehow resists longer, the population in their growing paranoia starts suspecting him. They might think he's poisoning them, or he's hoarding resources, or he's not who he says he is.
So the command structure just dissolves into the general madness.
Completely. Once leadership fails, communal efforts collapse. Maintaining complex systems like water purification, hydroponics, waste disposal, that requires cooperation and trust. Both are gone.
People stop working together, maybe form small paranoid cliques.
Initially, perhaps. Small groups huddling together, suspecting other groups. But as the delusions intensify, even those small groups fracture. It devolves into individual survival, or maybe just small, feral packs driven by hallucination-fueled aggression.
And that's where the violence comes in, the state you find the vault in.
Yes. Terminal entries you can find, plus the environmental storytelling, the bodies, the decay, the scattered hostile survivors still affected Yorth. They paint a picture of escalating, chaotic violence. Not organized warfare, but sudden, brutal outbursts. People attacking shadows, attacking friends or family they suddenly perceive as monsters, fighting over imagined slights or resources.
Just a complete descent into primal fear and violence, fueled by chemicals. They basically poisoned these poor bastards with perpetual fear until they turned on each other. That is some seriously fucked up social science.
It's among the most brutal vault experiments we know of, precisely because it targets the mind so directly and comprehensively. It wasn't about radiation or FEV, it was about dismantling sanity itself.
What were the specific hallucinations like eventually? Does the player's experience give us clues?
The player's experience is key. The lone wanderer sees spectral figures, sometimes resembling vault dwellers, flickering in and out of existence. They see familiar faces, distorted. The environment loops or shifts unnaturally. This suggests the residents experience similar phenomena, seeing ghostly figures, perhaps loved ones or perceived enemies appearing and disappearing, rooms changing, auditory hallucinations like voices or screams. Their reality became completely untethered.
A living nightmare, tailored maybe even to individual fears as the chemicals interacted with their brains.
That's a strong possibility. While the player's experience is unique due to their personal history, the underlying mechanism, reality distortion, manifestation of fears, paranoia was likely universal for the original inhabitants.
Why would Vault-Tec want this data? What's the end game for an experiment designed purely to drive people insane, it seems? Almost pointlessly cruel.
From a purely pragmatic, amoral, corporate military perspective, it's not pointless, it's data on control. Understanding exactly how to chemically induce societal collapse, how to manipulate perception on a mass scale, how to weaponize psychology. That's incredibly valuable information for an entity aiming for total control in a post-apocalyptic world.
Like the Enclave, perhaps.
Or Vault-Tec itself, positioning itself to be the new power. They weren't just studying failure, they were potentially refining methods of psychological warfare or mass social control. How resilient is the human mind? How long does it take to break a community chemically? What are the most effective agents? These are the questions 106 was designed to answer.
So less about survival, more about domination through manufactured reality. That adds another layer of horror.
It makes Vault 106 not just a tragedy, but potentially a proving ground for future weapons of mass psychological destruction.
And the remnants of that weapon are still lingering when the lone wanderer walks in centuries later.
Okay, let's pivot to that very experience. The player, the lone wanderer, stumbling into this nightmare. Our fourth question is from Psych Vault Boy, love it.
Ah, good one.
Psych Vault Boy asks, the lone wanderer, the player character, experiences Vault 106 differently. What exactly is unique about their encounter, and what does the entire sequence reveal about the player's own psychological state or reliability as a narrator?
This is where Vault 106 becomes really interesting from a narrative standpoint, not just a lore one. The lone wanderer walks in, and almost immediately, things get weird.
Yeah, it's not like other vaults where you might find logs, bodies, maybe some ghouls or creatures. Here, the environment attacks you psychologically. The colors shift, right? That weird visual filter kicks in.
Exactly. A desaturation or shift in the color palette, often accompanied by a disorienting audio cue. And then the hallucinations start. But they aren't generic monsters.
Also personal, that's the unique part. That's the crux of it. While there are spectral, hostile, insane survivors who seem to be remnants of the original population still affected, the core hallucinations are drawn directly from the lone wanderer's own life and psyche.
Specifically Dad, James.
James is the primary manifestation. He appears repeatedly, sometimes seemingly helpful, sometimes just standing there, sometimes glitching or distorted. He might call out to you, reference things from your shared past in Vault 101.
Why James? Why not, say, Amata or the Overseer from 101? Other figures tied to recent trauma.
What's fascinating here is the likely mechanism. The residual chemicals in the air aren't just causing random hallucinations, they seem to interact with the subject's mind, dredging up figures and memories associated with deep-seated emotional anchors, stress, or unresolved issues.
And for the lone wanderer, James is the central figure. The whole quest is initially about finding him. He represents safety, answers, the past.
Exactly. He's the emotional and narrative core. Amata, the Overseer, they represent the loss of the old life, the betrayal. But James represents the goal, the hope, however complicated, that drives the player forward. So the Vault's lingering influence targets that foundational figure.
It weaponizes the player's own motivations against them. That's clever. And disturbing.
Extremely. By making James appear, often distorted or unresponsive, sometimes even hostile in the player's perception, the Vault forces the player to confront the fragility of their own quest and memories. Is this really Dad? Can I trust what I'm seeing? If my anchor to reality and purpose can be so easily faked or twisted by this environment, what else is unreliable?
So it directly attacks the player's reliability as a narrator, or at least their perception.
Precisely. It's a meta-commentary almost. The game uses Vault 106 to make you, the player, question the stability of the lone wanderer's psyche. After leaving Vault 101, searching for James, facing the horrors of the wasteland, Is the Wanderer entirely stable? Or does this vault simply reveal pre-existing cracks amplified by the chemicals?
It makes you wonder if other weird encounters in the game might also be colored by the Wanderer's perception.
It certainly plants that seed of doubt. The sequence shows the Wanderer grappling with themes of loss, separation, the search for truth, and the potential distortion of memory, all mirrored in the way James manifests and disappears within the vault. The vault acts as a psychological crucible, forcing these internal conflicts to the surface in a terrifyingly literal way.
Are there other personalized hallucinations, or is it mostly James?
James is the most prominent and recurring figure. There might be other more fleeting images or sensations tied to Vault 101, but the focus is overwhelmingly on the father figure. It's the most potent symbol to manipulate for this specific protagonist.
Any trivia about the design? Does the developers ever comment on why they made it so psychological?
While specific developer quotes might be scattered, the general understanding is that Vault 106 was intentionally designed as a break from typical combat-focused dungeon crawls. They wanted a sequence that emphasized atmosphere, psychological horror, and narrative themes over just shooting enemies.
So less about clearing rooms, more about surviving a mental assault.
Exactly. It was meant to be unsettling, disorienting, and to resonate with the Lone Wanderer's personal journey. By making the hallucinations personal, they created a much more memorable and impactful experience than if it had just been, say, generic spooky ghosts. It connects the vault's past horror directly to the player's present struggle.
It really works. It's one of the most memorable sequences in the game for that reason. It feels violating almost.
Because it targets the player's emotional investment in the character and story. It's not just the Wanderer being messed with, you are being messed with.
Yeah. Okay, so the Wanderer survives this personalized hellscape, hopefully gets what they need, and gets out. But that whole experience leaves you thinking about the different kinds of survival and different kinds of death. Which brings us perfectly to our final question. This one's quite philosophical from Doorkicker98.
Okay, let's hear.
Doorkicker asks, let's zoom out. What happened to the people who were sealed out when the bombs fell? And is there any philosophical merit to the idea that those who died instantly were actually the luckiest people in the world? Also, did anyone ever successfully escape 106?
Right, zooming out, the fate of those left outside the vault door. It's grim, obviously.
Understatement of the century. We're talking about being caught unprotected in a nuclear attack zone.
Exactly. For anyone near the entrance of Vault 106 when the bombs hit the DC area, there are really only a few possibilities, none of them good. If they were close enough to a direct impact, instant vaporization, obliteration.
A clean end, in a way. Horrifying, but quick.
Comparatively quick, yes. If they were slightly further out, they'd face the blast wave, immense physical trauma, being thrown, crushed, burned. Then the firestorms,
Wow.
and then the fallout.
Lethal doses of radiation within minutes or hours.
Almost certainly. Anyone exposed directly would succumb to acute radiation sickness very quickly. We're talking days, maybe weeks, of horrific suffering. Nausea, vomiting, hair loss, internal bleeding, immune system collapse. A truly agonizing death, alone in a world turned to ash and fire.
Plus the terror of seeing the vault door close just before it hit, knowing safety was right there.
That adds a layer of psychological torture, even before the physical effects. The ultimate what if. The ultimate denial of sanctuary at the last possible second. It's brutal.
Okay, so death by fire, blast, or radiation poisoning. Horrible. But then we compare it to what happened inside Vault 106. Decades of chemically induced paranoia, delusion, violence, losing your mind, maybe turning into one of those feral survivors.
Living in constant fear, unable to trust reality or anyone around you, eventually succumbing to violence or starvation or despair in a concrete tomb filled with invisible poison.
So, Doorkicker's question. Is there philosophical merit to the idea that those vaporized instantly, or even those who died relatively quickly from radiation outside, were actually the lucky ones compared to the residents of 106?
I think looking specifically at Vault 106, the argument is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Yes. Survival is usually seen as the ultimate goal, the prime directive. But 106 forces us to ask, survival at what cost?
What's the point of preserving the body if the mind, the personality, the very essence of being human is deliberately destroyed?
Precisely. The people outside died as themselves. Their suffering, though potentially immense for those who lingered, had a physical cause and an end. The residents of 106 were sentenced to a living death, transformed into puppets of chemically induced madness. Their survival was arguably a far crueler fate than a quick, albeit violent, end in the initial exchange.
They were preserved only to be desecrated from the inside out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Vault 106 serves as a stark commentary on the value Vault-Tec placed on life, which is to say, very little beyond its utility as data. They prioritized the experiment's continuation over any concept of humane existence for the subjects. The survival they offered was a perversion of the term.
It makes you reevaluate the whole concept of making it into a vault. For some, it was just trading one apocalypse for another, potentially much worse one.
For the residents of 106, unquestionably worse. A quick death versus decades of torment ending in feral insanity. It's not much of a choice, philosophically speaking. The outsiders, in this specific horrific context, drew the shorter, arguably better straw.
It's a bleak thought. Okay, the last part of Door Kicker's question. Did anyone ever actually get out? Did any resident of 106 manage to escape the sanctuary after the experiment took hold?
Based on the state of the vault and the nature of the experiment, it seems extremely unlikely, probably impossible.
Why so definite?
Several factors. First, the internal state. As society collapsed inside, who would organize an escape? Who would maintain the knowledge or equipment needed to operate the complex vault door mechanism from the inside? The residents were becoming increasingly paranoid, delusional, and violent. Coordinated, complex action like opening a vault door would be beyond them.
They couldn't trust each other enough to even try.
Exactly, and they likely wouldn't even trust the idea of escape. Their reality was the vault. The outside world might have become just another delusion or a source of greater terror planted by the drugs. They were psychologically contained as much as physically.
And even if, by some miracle, one or two less affected individuals did manage to get the door open somehow, what then?
Then they step out into the immediate post-war capital wasteland. We're talking about potentially lethal radiation levels right outside the door, especially in early years or decades. No infrastructure, hostile mutated creatures eventually emerging. They'd be trading the chemically induced hell for a radioactive one, likely without protective gear or survival knowledge.
So escape was probably a death sentence anyway.
A different, quicker one perhaps, but yes. The vault was designed as a closed system for the experiment's duration. The overseer and security might have had protocols, but once they succumbed or were killed, the knowledge and authority to open the vault likely died with them. The survivors were trapped by the breakdown of their own society, by their chemically altered minds, and by the lethal environment outside. Vault 106 was a one-way trip.
Sealed by Vault-Tec, sealed by the bombs, and ultimately sealed by the madness they cultivated inside. No exit.
A perfect, horrifying closed loop.
Wow. Okay, that covers the main questions, I think. It paints a pretty complete and deeply disturbing picture. So what does this all mean? Let's try and wrap this up. #TagJagOutro.
Well, to summarize what we've dug into, Vault 106 stands out, even among Vault-Tec's gallery of horrors. Its primary purpose wasn't sheltering anyone. It was a dedicated facility for studying the effects of long-term, low-level exposure to aerosolized hallucinogens.
Right. A chemical warfare experiment disguised as a sanctuary. They pumped psychoactive drugs into the air, subtly at first, driving a normal cross-section of society into paranoia, delusion, and ultimately violent collapse.
We saw how the initial trauma of the bombs falling created a perfect baseline of fear, making the residents more susceptible. And crucially, the vault's engineering held, preserving the experiment even as it doomed the inhabitants.
And then there's the lone wanderer's experience. The vault doesn't just feel haunted, it actively messes with the player's head, using residual chemicals to generate personalized hallucinations, specifically targeting the figure of James, the father.
Which acts as this fascinating psychological mirror, reflecting the wanderer's own traumas and raising questions about their reliability and the nature of perception within the game's world. What's fascinating here is how the horror is tailored.
Definitely. And finally, we wrestled with that grim philosophical question, comparing the fate of those inside to those left outside.
And the horrifying conclusion, at least regarding 106, seems to be that instant death in the apocalypse might have been a mercy compared to the decades of engineered psychological torture the survivors endured. If we connect this to the bigger picture, survival isn't always the preferable outcome.
It really underscores Vault-Tec's absolute disregard for human life beyond its value as experimental data. So what does this all mean? What's the final takeaway?
I think Vault 106 is a chilling testament to the potential for science and engineering to be twisted towards deeply unethical ends. The ability to build something so resilient, coupled with the willingness to use it for something so destructive to the human spirit, It's profound.
It really makes you think about the nature of control.
And that leads to the final thought I wanted to leave you, our listener, with, something to mull over. We know Vault-Tec ran this experiment. We know they gathered data on how to systematically destroy sanity and social cohesion using chemicals. So the provocative question is, why gather that specific data? Was it purely academic curiosity about human limits? Or was it something more practical? Were they testing methods, refining tools, not just to observe breakdown, but to potentially induce it on command in the future?
You mean as a weapon? Or a tool for social control?
Exactly. Imagine a post-war entity, maybe Vault-Tec, maybe the Enclave, maybe someone else who found their research possessing a proven chemical method to ensure compliance, to pacify dissent, or to simply keep populations broken, manageable, perpetually confused by subtly altering the very air they breathe. What if 106 wasn't just about learning how humans break, but learning how to keep them broken?
A world where your own reality could be subtly chemically edited by whoever's in charge? That's a nightmare way beyond mutants and radiation.
It suggests the horrors of the old world might have been preparing even darker methods for controlling the new one.
Okay, on that deeply unsettling note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Vault 106. It was illuminating in a terrifying way.
Always a pleasure to explore these dark corners with you. Food for thought indeed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious, question everything, and maybe invest a good gas mask. Just kidding. Mostly. Be well.
Take care.